Hello, and welcome to this session about scaling impact investment, where we will try to see how impact investment can be taken to the next level in Europe. We are lucky enough to have two excellent speakers and influential people in the European investment landscape. We have Uli Grabenwarter. As any venture capitalist in Europe knows, Uli is the Deputy Director for Equity Investments at EIF, and in this capacity, he oversees EIF's activities in impact investing, technology transfer, and venture capital. EIF is one of Europe's biggest fund of funds investment platform in that space, so I think we can say that Uli is a very important person in the European investment landscape. And then we also have Niklas Adalberth. Niklas is a Swedish entrepreneur. He is the founder of Carna Bank, Norksön Foundation, and recently Norksön VC. He's one of the, we can say, European impact entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs. So I think we can have a very interesting dialogue. Unfortunately, we only have 25 minutes, so we'll have to get very directly to the point. But thank you very much, Uli and Niklas, for joining the SHIP2B Impact Forum. So I'd like to start with Niklas. Niklas, since your personal story is already one of scaling impact investing, I would appreciate if you can summarize for all of us like a very brief intro to Klarna and the story and your journey in Klarna. When and why did you decide to start the Norksön Foundation? And then how it was that you decided to put a new arm on Norksön VC.
All right, so feel free to interrupt me if I'm totally derailing. I'm hearing an echo now, but hopefully no one else. I'll turn my volume down a little bit. Oh, now it's much better. Thank you so much. Well, so I was lucky to have a smart friend that came up with the idea behind Klarna. And I was just a couple of months into my business studies in Stockholm and heard this idea about how to enable invoice-based payment solutions to e-commerce companies. I really didn't understand the idea, to be honest. And we had no money and no experience of building companies. My previous experience was basically from flipping burgers at Burger King. And we had no clue how to develop and program a system. But we said, let's give it 6 months and see what's happening. And if we fail, I can pursue a career within investment banking and hopefully be successful within that. But we were very lucky. After 20 visits to different Swedish business angels, one of them decided to invest 600,000 crowns, which is about 60,000 euros for 10% of the company. And since we were connected with the e-commerce companies, we were able to grow as quickly as them. It was very lucky and fortunate. And yeah, it went quite well, I guess. And I remember getting my first partial exit, selling off about 10 million euros of shares. So going from being very much in debt to finally have all these zeros on my bank account. And what do you do then? Well, I decided to go to Las Vegas on my way to a conference in San Francisco. It was a very short notice. I didn't get anyone to join me, so went by business class for the first time, get a glass of champagne, and not without, I mean, compared to being yelled at in the economy class, perhaps. And checked into this big panorama suite in Las Vegas and living the dream, right? And but then this feeling started to erupt within me that is this really what I've been fighting for all these years? And was this really worth my girlfriend that broke up with me because I worked too much and all the friends that I lost on the way? And I tried to push back those feelings and instead go out to shop like crazy. Coming back again to this panorama suite, start looking at these bags, Gucci, Prada, and they looked back at me with a message of like, "You're so pathetic," and I just started to cry and crashed in that suite, realizing that money means absolutely nothing, and this goal in life was nothing to really pursue. And a lot of people know this already. There's a lot of research backing this up, but I guess I wasn't smart enough to listen in on that. And that's when I did this big career shift, I guess. So also starting to realize how lucky in life I've been with being born in Sweden, lovely parents at the best of times, lucky with my company, and also starting to reflect a little bit that what is really the net effect of Klarna. I mean, of course, we may make shopping online a little bit easier, but the downside is that we also offer people to pay in installments. And is that really what the world is needing right now? So with those reflections, I decided to quit after 10 years and instead go into Norrsken Foundation. That was a long answer to your question.
All right, thank you. And then, Niklas, you started, I understand, just a couple of years ago, the VC arm of Norrsken Foundation, right? Can you tell us a bit?
Right. So the idea is really that to try to use my skills of building companies, but to use those skills instead to impact companies and try to create as good ecosystem as possible. And one part of that is that we're trying to provide capital. And we started off with a quite small fund. It's only 3 investors together with Norrsken, and it was a 25 million euro fund, and it was very special, lousy terms because the investors could only at maximum get their money back. We thought it could be like a conflict of interest or a trade-off between financial return and impact. But just a year or two in, it turned out that the companies that achieved the best impact were also the ones that achieved the best financial return as well. So the companies we invest in has a one-to-one link with revenue and impact. So it was not something we could deselect or so. So we thought that, hey, it's actually a business opportunity here. Maybe this actually can perform even better than a normal market return VC out there. And that's when we decided to launch 100 million euro early stage impact VC, as we just did with EIF as a very important anchor investor in this fund. And now the model is that we're going to try to reach 20% IRR, so market returns to the investors. And the idea behind this, why we think it is a way of creating really good impact, is that if we can prove that you can combine impact and financial return, that's where I think that the real big capital can move in this direction and hence scale impact.
Okay, and my last question to you in this part, Niklas. I understand you are already investing. So what's the investment thesis in terms of geographies, challenge you focus on, a stage of the projects? And then we've been talking about in this journey about blended finance. So the possibility of different shareholders having different type of participation in the funds, some more, if you want, impact oriented and some more financial oriented. I think this is the case with your fund. Can you tell us a little bit about that? So thesis and blended finance?
Right, so thesis basically is that we're trying to find the best entrepreneurs that can build the best companies that have impact within their business model. So great entrepreneurs, impact embedded in the business model. It needs to be technology so that they can scale if they are successful. We're impact agnostic. We think the scarce factor here is really great entrepreneurs. So we cannot afford to go into a specific segment. And tickets we write is everything between 300,000 euros to 3 million euros. And in the fund as well, we have two different buckets, you can say. One is the commercial return bucket, and then we also have a bucket that we call moonshot, where the investors don't really expect any return, and they take full downside risk for the other investors coming in. So in that one, we can take really bold bets and really invest with impact first, because in the end, I think it is a trade-off. Some great impact ideas just doesn't have a great business model, and we want them to get financing as well, and we can achieve that with this fund.
Great, thank you. Uli, great to have you here. So yeah, you are an investor in Niklas VC. Would you say this is quite an exceptional case, or are there arising similar stories all around Europe?
Well, I'm very grateful we have Niklas here and telling his story and inspiring all of us with his genesis of himself and of his fund, because it also inspired us to invest in him, to be honest, and his franchise and venture that he's putting together with his team. I think if you look at it from today's perspective, it's no longer an exception. But when we started the investment activities in impact investing some 7-8 years ago, it definitely was an exception. It was a time where I myself had to preach to the board of EIF and the management of EIF still that we are not embarking in something that is a charity, but that this is an investment business. And I think since then we've come a very long way, because not only have we proven in the meantime that we are not embarking in charity, but that we are doing real investing. At the same time, we've also seen that the type of businesses that so-called social venture funds are backing today are investment targets for investment firms of the mainstream venture capital market. And not only that, we have actually seen that the venture capital community of so-called social impact investors nowadays is called by the mainstream VC funds into financing rounds of mainstream companies in order to participate in financing rounds and bring in the knowledge and the skills on how to orient a business model into an impact conscious business, because it has become simply a fact of competitiveness in today's environment. And I think that is probably the most encouraging evolution that we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Uli, I know that EIF has specific programs for impact investment. So how do you define impact investing? In other words, what do you need to see in a VC firm to make it eligible for the impact investment program? Because as you know, how to define impact investing is quite a big issue in this world.
It indeed is, and we have been struggling with that for quite some time ourselves. And basically what we've started off with is that we required our fund managers that we invested in under the social impact process to define for each investment that they're embarking in an impact agenda for the portfolio company, meaning to set impact targets that they're going after in the business model of the company in a way that is intrinsically linked to the objective that those funds, that those companies pursue. And we also have in impact investing adopted the approach where we link the performance remuneration of the fund manager to the impact performance of the portfolio that they're building over time. That has been the outset. But if you look at it from today's perspective, I think as we speak, building the impact investment activity with that approach, we are actually looking at the impact agenda at large and how we actually can push this to the next level. How can we bring that to the next quantum leap that we all need in the market? And I think I almost would like to compare it to the image that Niklas portrayed in describing his own experience when he was looking at the shopping bags of Prada and Gucci and the like when he was coming back from the shopping tour. I think we are today in a situation where as an impact investment community, we need to ask ourselves the same question when we look at what is going on in the impact investment space and what is the scale that we are going after. Because One thing is to count the number of zeros and the figures of money that goes into impact investing or so-called impact investing. And we obviously can have the objective of scaling that to whatever figure that we want to. But the real question that we need to ask ourselves behind is how can we scale the impact that we achieve with that money that we are deploying? And I think the approach that we are currently working on at EIF that we are pursuing is no longer the question of how can we add more money to the impact investment space, and rather ask ourselves the question, how can we get to a state where we are not spending one single euro in investment anymore without knowing what we can expect as impact in return. And I think that is the next paradigm shift that we all need to strive towards.
Mm-hmm. Another topic that has been quite present in our discussion so far is to what extent impact investment has to be on one side, and let's say traditional financial investment has to be on one other side, and we need to scale this part of the impact investing, or if the most effective way to scale impact investing is to merge both, so that impact investment somehow becomes mainstream investment, or that financial investors, unless they also take into account the impact part of their investments, they will no longer be able to stay in the market. Maybe this is a long time from now, but how do you see this? Do you think we should separate clearly impact investment and mainstream investment, or you think it will tend to merge somehow? Uli.
Shall I take it, or Niklas, or?
I was asking to you, Uli. I mean,
I'm a beginner in this. You've done this for so much time, so over to you.
Well, I would say that the question of how do we merge the two worlds is relatively simple, or has become relatively simple over the last, let's say, over the last couple of years. I think historically we had this polarization between profit on one side and impact on the other side. And I think today we are living in an environment where the combination of the two is the creation of value. And that has come about because we have got more and more stakeholder communities out there in the market that are ready to pay for impact that is created as a value component. Even if companies are not profitable in the cash flow sense, the fact that they are contributing to the creation of societal value makes them valuable assets in the market. And that sounds counterintuitive, but actually, if you look at it from the perspective of so-called traditional businesses or traditional technology companies, the fact that we have plenty of companies that are actually financially loss-making and big-time loss-making and still continue to be one of the most valuable and most valued assets in the markets, that has nothing else to do than with the fact that we are in an environment where the value creation is multidimensional, where people pay for different forms of assets and value that is created in a company context. And that is no different in the social investment space, where the society has understood that there are business models that are proposed out there that can create societal value that otherwise would have to be paid by taxpayers' money, and that is much more expensive. And I think that is a perspective that has grown far beyond the space of social enterprises today and is taking the space in the mainstream venture capital markets alike.
Okay, Niklas, what's your vision on that? How do you think, or what do we need to do to really scale impact investment in Europe or worldwide?
So I don't know, but I know that in my business school 15 years ago, the highest status job was to become a consultant or a banker. I think today is more about people want to be entrepreneurs and start the next consumer credit company or addictive game or maybe online casino or whatever. If you can change that so that the highest status at the top schools out there, enabling the next level entrepreneurs, if that can be impact entrepreneurs, if that is the highest status in society, I think then we will see some really, really influential impact companies in the next 10 years. And I think that's why this conference and what Shift2B is doing is so good, to build that kind of ecosystem and narrative. And we're trying to do a little bit the same in Stockholm as well. So increase the status of being in impact. And I think we're in great shape in getting there.
All right. We have a few questions. We have not even 5 minutes, but we have a few questions from the public. The first one, Uli, is a geographical one. So would you say that today impact investment is evenly distributed around Europe? I guess the answer is no, but then where is impact investment more developed today in Europe?
I think it's not so much a question of a function of the impact investment space as such. It's more a question of the maturity of equity markets and venture capital equity markets as such. We see in terms of the density of activity roughly the same distribution as we see in the general venture capital space. You've got clusters that are around the core markets, France, UK, Scandinavia, Germany, and the like, but we have seen in the recent history a very strong pickup in the countries in Southern Europe and notably Spain. I think Spain has made a tremendous evolution over the last 2-3 years in the social finance space and the impact investment space, and the activities of the Spanish National Advisory Board, I think, just witnesses of that. We have a similar evolution in the Italian market, and we see more and more activities coming out of the Central and Eastern European regions as well, where we have actually backed from EIF's resources in the last couple of years the first handful of funds that are operating in that space, and give us actually very encouraging signs of this market developing very well too.
All right.
I mean, sorry to jump in.
Yes.
Why do you think that is, Uli? Well, and how can we replicate that in other European geographies?
I think it is partly it was driven by a crisis environment. I think that is one of the components that people actually more naturally tended to entrepreneurial activities. And obviously, if you have got increasing societal issues to solve, if you address it with a social enterprise business models, there's at least one thing that you need not to worry about, which is that there is no market. Because if the problem is there and you propose a solution for it, that's something that naturally incentivizes social enterprises to grow. And then obviously also the offer for social enterprises in terms of funding has increased in the same time frame. But I think what we can do to replicate that, and you have been mentioning it, Niklas, through the educational exposure that we all take to people leaving universities, going into MBA programs and the like. I've seen the same thing in the teaching activity that I'm doing, that there are more and more students that actually are not satisfied with the McKinsey careers anymore, that are going for purpose-driven businesses and job opportunities, and actually go the route of entrepreneurs to actually make that happen. And I think we have a collective responsibility to encourage that movement amongst people coming out of our best schools.
Okay, Niklas, the last minute is for you. We have just 1 minute. There is one question very directly directed to you, which is, it says, Niklas, what is the worst thing for a social entrepreneur? Lacking financial resources, emotional stress, loneliness? What would you say to entrepreneurs that are listening to you to give them comfort in just a couple of sentences?
I think about being an entrepreneur is a roller coaster, and the one that can endure it as long as possible and stay alive during all of these like emotional shift that is like on an hourly basis, I think they are the one that are able to make it. I don't know if that answered the question, but at least in advice.
All right. So we could be here for much longer time. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have both of you with us today. Thank you very much. And let's hope we can all take it to the next level.
Buenas tardes, Barcelona.
Adiós.
Adiós.